It's okay. No worries. No worries. We're live. You want to start? We're good. Okay. Does Rick have audio on?
He just looks muted.
But he's here.
Yeah, I'm here. There you go.
There he is. Okay. All right, guys. Welcome to our October 13th Planning Commission, our work session meeting. I'd like to welcome everybody here. We have, let's see, all the council members present except for Commissioner Nye and Commissioner Wingfield. Is that the only two I'm missing?
Yeah, has Wingfield been asked to be excused? Has anybody heard from him?
I haven't. I'll text him.
Yeah, I haven't heard from either. So if you guys have heard from Nye, that's perfect. But I have not heard from Wingfield.
I'll text him. Presentation and reports, Mr. Agate.
Thank you. There's not a lot of new considering what we have this evening. I guess what I would note is that the two Peninsula homes on 4400 have been demoed where that subdivision is. So you probably have seen that if you live kind of in the area of 4400. There's also that home up at the Green Hill Apartments that will be probably going through demolition this week. It's kind of an old home that used to be there. Well, still there, but it won't be there much longer. Along 300 West, that's coming out. The Comcast Store, our Xfinity Store is open. It's where Batteries Plus used to be. It's in that location. It's open for business. And the building where Zeppies is going in is moving well. Zeppies got a building permit issued to start doing interior development for their needs, so that's moving forward. Just trying to think of things I reviewed with the mayor today. Scandinavian Designs just needs a final permit, but they're pretty much there if they can get their final approval, a final inspection completed. The Aaron's remodel rebuild after the second fire finally got a building permit issued, so thank goodness that's moving forward. And the Riverdale Business Park Phase 2 up by Bravo Arts is about 40% completion point. And that's pretty much it for now. And there's some other things conceptually, but that's pretty much what I had to share. So unless there's any other questions, I'll defer to the group. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Consent item. Did anybody have anything from the meeting minutes from September 22nd? The work session or our regular session? Okay. We'll move forward to action items. Public hearing to receive and consider comments regarding proposed amendments to Title 10 of Riverdale City Code, specifically Chapters 13D, 16, 21, 25, and 28. I will refer that to you, Mr. Wright.
Thank you. All right. We reviewed this at our last meeting before we set the public hearing in some detail. I will note there's been one small addition that has been added since our meeting. This is per direction of the city attorney and also Mayor Searle. There was a change added. If you look at summary reasoning for proposed code change near the bottom of Title 10, Chapter 28, there's a sentence that's been added. It says changes are also proposed to the overnight parking standards on hard surfaces to clarify the intended purpose of this language for overnight parking per guidance from the code enforcement officer and city attorney. So that is something to note that has been changed since we last looked at this item. Otherwise, everything is still there as was provided at the previous point. Remember with the public hearing to make a motion to open the public hearing, allow comment, and then motion to close public hearing. And then we can move forward from that. The noted change specifically in Chapter 25 of Title 10, or excuse me, Chapter 28 of Title 10 says under Section 5, it says no vehicle shall be allowed to park overnight on anything other than hard surfaces that are as large or larger than the full size, length, and width of the vehicle. So that's the suggested amendment there. What we've been having in the community is individuals who park a vehicle on surfaces that are hard in the form of a brick or a paver under each tire, and then say that that's legally overnight parked in anywhere in their yard. So they're basically trying to find a loop around our way around the code to do what they want to do. So the direction is to make the code a little stronger by making it so the entire hardscape surface is a pad for the vehicle to be parked on that covers its length and width in full. And the attorney is supportive of that suggested change. Otherwise, as was noted before, all suggested amendments as otherwise constituted and provided are supported by our city attorney as noted with his report that says, Mike, these changes look fine to me, Steve Brooks or SB. So that's pretty much the context of what we're doing tonight with this one. And in order to not take up too much more time, I'll defer to the Planning Commission for further discussion or questions you might have.
Any questions, discussions? Okay. We will go to item number 2, consideration of recommendation to City Council for approval of amended small subdivision plat known as Riverdale Center 6 subdivision, property located approximately 43 South Riverdale, Utah, 84405, requested by Anderson, Wallen and Associates. Mr. Reggett?
Thank you. There's 2 items. I forgot to note this earlier. There's 2 items on tonight's agenda. I should have maybe done this during the staff report that have asked to be tabled, or not even tabled, asked to be removed from the agenda in the main meeting. This is one of those items. In light of the fire department's comments in your packet, you'll note the fire marshal basically said that this item ought to not move forward until resolving fire concerns. I can't remember his exact words. Let me find them. Until they come up with a plan for the fire suppression system and implement it, this should not go forward. And when he says implement, I think showing that plan and having an understanding of what they're going to do as part of this subdivision. So this item actually needs to be noted. What I would say, Commissioner Spires or Chair Spires, is to, at the beginning of the meeting, note this item has been removed from the agenda for the purposes of tonight's meeting right at the onset, as well as the item for Raising Cane's. And I'll explain the Raising Cane's removal from the agenda as well shortly. But both of those items, which would be item E2 and, if I can get to the agenda, item E2 and E5 will need to be removed from tonight's agenda per request from the applicants. And again, the reasoning for this one to be removed is they want more time to find out if it's economically feasible and reasonable to do improvements in the building for fire suppression and water line installations where necessary to protect the building should they subdivide it, because that will lead to some building permitting upgrades and water line upgrades for the building. So they're going to kind of revise their request and see if they still want to take it forward. So I will put it back on the agenda if and when they feel like they do want to bring that back forward. So with that, that's all I have for that one, and I guess that we can move on to item 3 at your discretion unless there's any other questions.
I think that's great. Item number 3, consideration of recommendation to City Council for approval of amended small subdivision plat known as RMRE 1050 West Retail Lot 1 amended subdivision, property located approximately 4978 South, 1050 West, Riverdale, Utah, 84405. requested by Anderson, Whalen and Associates. Mr. Eggett? Your mute button's on.
This one is going forward. It's the same applicant in this case, but this one they are going to move forward. This is the property over by Joanne's, the Joanne's parcel, and then their surrounding parcels that are undeveloped between it and Sam's Club. This subdivision is for that area of the city. It is amended subdivision plat proposal, and that was an already previously subdivided area that would be further subdivided in this case. There's no public hearing requirement for tonight's meeting, being that this is a small subdivision and an amended subdivision request. Technically, the planning commission could make a recommendation to city council this evening for either approval or not approval or amended approval based on the appropriate findings of fact for such a recommendation. Should it receive a final approval recommendation, then the proposed amended plat would go to city council for their final consideration of the approval of the subdivision. The properties are currently owned by Group FC Riverdale Shopping Center LLC, which is also CCA or Cornwasser Group out of California. We had this amended subdivision plat from them come back earlier in the year. Actually, two of them. That's the same group. They've acquired the Target Shopping Center and Joanne's property, and as you remember, the old Boyer properties around Lowe's and RC Willie, that area. So this is another one of their subdivisions here. Their intent is to divide it off so that it will allow for a new large undeveloped parcel that could have development opportunities. They do have some conceptual ideas in place. They feel like it protects their investments better to separate the two lots, do ground separation in this case. So that's their goal there. You do have obviously all the reports from the city engineer, public works director, fire chief, police chief, and I'm not sure if the fire marshal commented on this one or not, but they're in your packet. The general plan use where the property is planned commercial high. The subdivision obviously is kind of mute, but it supports it. If we can get more commercial retail on the undeveloped parcels, then we're doing what we need to meet the general plan in that application. Again, for the purposes of time, I won't get too much into the nitty-gritties of our reports. I'll do that during the main meeting, but you can see my review. I just have a few small items that need to be addressed. Then moving on to staff reports. Small concern from Public Works Director. He says, the only concern I have on this one is that they have agreements in place for shared utilities. Probably lot to lot is his thoughts there. The police chief doesn't have any concerns. Fire chief didn't provide comments. The fire marshal did provide comments on this one, says I don't see any issues with this. And then he just notes comments made during this review or advisory and do not prevent the necessity of conforming with requirements, which might have been overlooked in the review process. And then you have a report from our city engineer, which is about almost 2 full pages. So I'll review those during the main meeting. And then obviously the subdivision application, the fees are paid, and then the representation of what they're requesting thereafter is showing the plat of lot 1 and lot 2 and how that would be separated. So hopefully that gives you what you're looking for, but if you have any follow-up questions or concerns for me, I'd be happy to answer those and go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eggett. So we'll move on to number 4, consideration of preliminary subdivision site plan and plat approval of Riverdale Landing Phase 2 subdivision, property located approximately 400 to 500 West Riverdale Road, Riverdale, Utah, is requested by Anderson, Whalen and Associates. Mr. Eggett?
Perfect. And so the petitioner on this one is the DRH company. They're represented tonight by Eric Malmberg. D. Hansen is the principal DRH as well. He may attend from time to time as this moves forward. They've applied for the preliminary subdivision site plan approval for two new restaurant building installations with drive-through, which will include a new private access drive aisle, a couple actually, some new utilities and supporting facilities as part of the development project for the real estate. It will create a new private drive that we kind of have been calling 400 West Drive, or sometimes it will be known as Brands. I think Brands Way is what they're showing on the drawings. That will not be a dedicated city street, so please take that into note as we talk about it. It will be a private shared drive aisle that will be used for all the properties in this commercial center, including the currently, obviously, Raising Cane's item that has been removed from tonight's agenda per their request. But that will be accessed by this new drive access way. There will also be a drive access way that will be located east of Riverdale Road. That will be an internal road that's already been partially started along Krispy Kreme. That road will continue as it works its way north. The parcels in this zone are all commercial to community commercial, C2, which requires them to go through a conditional use review process. That won't be required at this point, but it'll be required the night of the second review by the Planning Commission when it's being considered for a recommendation to City Council, as will Raising Cane's for that matter. The subdivision site plan is adjacent to the Krispy Kreme Cafe Restaurant, a vacant building to the north, apartment complex to the kind of northeast, and across the street from an already developed commercial center currently owned. This site is currently owned by DRH Properties LLC, and there is no public hearing requirement for tonight's meeting. Let's see here. Obviously, as I always note, be sure that we discuss any signage and lighting plans to the petitioner. They have provided in the packet both the signing, well, not the signage representation on this one, but they've provided a lighting photometric as well as other lighting on site in this one. So lighting is shown, but if you have any concerns relative to lighting, that is one of the items that typically in the future the conditional use permit will look at. So if you have concerns, it is fair to talk about it this evening if you feel it's desired. Tonight, the Planning Commission can make a motion to approve the preliminary submission of the Riverdale Landing Phase 2 subdivision and site plan proposal, approve the subdivision site plan with request modifications, table the matter for a later date, or not provide preliminary approval as long as you have appropriate findings of fact for your decision. The general plan use is planned commercial high for this project, and this project would comply with that use very easily at this location. I'll go over my review comments in more detail during the main meeting. One item I'll get at in just a second here. I'm working my way down. The Public Works Director has some comments as well. I'll review those in the main meeting. Quite a few he's shown. One thing you'll note under his, it says shared driveway plan review. The way this was submitted, there was a site plan proposal that was submitted, a subdivision that was then submitted independently on its own, and then the shared driveway plan was submitted as well. The shared driveway plan is an RDA assisted effort, so take that into account. The RDA is working in conjunction with DRH and AWA to accommodate the development of this site. So when it says shared driveway plan review, that is something that the redevelopment agency is partnering in and will help fund. So take that into account as you think about what we're talking about with this development in that portion of it. The police chief doesn't have any concerns with the proposed plan. The fire chief didn't provide comments. The fire marshal says, I do not see any issues at this time, and then he puts his disclaimer about comments being able to be subject to review. The main concern with this one at current time is found on the city engineer's plat, or city engineer's review, excuse me, where he's reporting some significant concerns with the plat from page 1 of his review to page 2 and to the end of page 2. At the beginning of page 3, he says, under improvement drawings, the submitted improvement drawings rely on the submitted vacation and dedication plats, and in order to proceed properly, the improvement drawings will need to be updated with all corrections made and then can be reviewed. Our city engineer is significantly concerned with the actual plat document itself, and because he is so concerned, he didn't feel like he could do a fully adequate review of the site plan drawings, and has reserved the right to review those and further, as well as due to the fact that these are concerns, the Raising Cane site plan he did not even review where it's tied to the subdivision, because he feels like there are too many outstanding issues with the subdivision and he didn't feel like he was ready to support or allow Raising Cane's to have a site plan review. So that's the reason that they were tabled. I further discussed this with Steve Brooks, our city attorney slash acting city administrator, for his guidance and direction. He's directed me to let you know, in his opinion, based on the engineer's decision at this time with the plat, he feels it would be most adequate to recommend you consider tabling this review this evening until these items can be worked out. I have not received any updated report from our city engineer to say otherwise, so I can only go off of the current review that our city attorney and acting city administrator has reviewed, which is what's in our packet. So with that, I think I've covered all the basics of it, and I can go into more details during the main meeting, but I would defer to any of you with the last 5 minutes we have if you have any questions for me. Mr. Malmberg is also present if during the work session you want to ask him any brief questions before we go into the main meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eggett. Any comments? We're gonna, since we're not gonna have number 5, we don't need to go over that, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Any comments, questions? Any discretionary items? Okay. With that, do we have a motion to adjourn to our meeting?
Don't need a motion.
No?
No, just go ahead and say we'll adjourn and we'll be back in 5 or something.
We'll adjourn and be back in 4.5 minutes. Okay, we ready? Rob's been trying to be on, but he's having some phone issues. So I'd like to welcome everybody to our October 13th Planning Commission meeting. Like all of our Planning Commission members are here with the exception of Rob Wingfield and Wanda Nye. And then our guests, do you want to give us your name and address for the record?
You don't necessarily need to do that. I guess you could if you want to, Amy. It's your call. You're the chairperson, but usually we do that if they present or if they want to comment, but it's your call.
Oh, you're right. Sorry. No, thank you. Do we have any public comment?
So I don't have anybody in here, and there's nothing on the YouTube and no emails.
Perfect. Perfect. We will go on then to presentation and reports with Mr. Eggett.
Thank you. Just one thing again, if you would note the items that we'll be removing from the meeting tonight or after, and then the one thing I did fail to note in our work session, the mayor had a round of interviews for the city administrator position last week. By understanding, there were 9 or 10 interviews. I don't know what the outcome is from those interviews. All I've heard is the mayor will eventually make his decision and proceed forward from there. I guess we'll wait and see what that looks like and who ends up where. But that currently is going on. Also, I didn't note, but I should note, Chick-fil-A is currently considering potentially an expansion plan for more drive-through aisle access on their site to accommodate traffic, so where they can accommodate up to 26 cars in the queue length and 2 queue lines around their building. So that very likely will work its way to the Planning Commission at a future date. With that, I'll note the other items I noted briefly. Scanning Designs close to opening. The Xfinity store is open in the previously existing batteries and bulbs store location. The Kashrubis Zeppi's building is moving forward with the Zeppi's getting a building permit to move forward with theirs. The housing unit in the Green Hill Apartments project area is currently going through demolition process. The 2 homes in the Nunzio Farms PRUD subdivision have been demolished and that subdivision moves forward, as does Old Mill subdivision, and the Riverdale Business Park Phase 2 is about a 40% plus completion with their 4-way being done. And yeah, things are moving forward. So I think that's really it. And if you have any other questions for me, I'd be glad to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eggett. Do anybody have any questions? Okay, we'll move on to consent items, consideration of meeting minutes from September 22nd, 2020 work session and September 22nd, 2020 regular meeting. Anybody have any corrections, changes, additions? Okay. Do we have a motion to approve?
I move we approve the consent items.
I'll second.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Our action items this evening are, do we need to open up the public meeting now?
I would initiate noting the 2 items that are going to be removed as action items and then go into item 1.
Okay. So I'm confused.
Just noticed for the action items, we would note that E2 and E5 have been requested to be
Oh,
removed
yes, I even wrote that down. Sorry, guys.
at tonight's
In
meeting.
in our action items, number E2 and E5 are to be removed and tabled for another time.
We need to make a motion to do that, or just,
No, just formally note that they've requested to be removed from the agenda, and they'll come forward if they're ready when they're.
Okay. Do we want to open the public hearing?
Mike, do we need to note that they requested those to be removed?
I asked the attorney, what we just discussed is sufficient, just noting that they've requested to be taken off the agenda for tonight's meeting, and they'll come back when they're ready. So with that, yes, Chair Spires, I would say it's probably good to go ahead and suggest holding a motion to go into a public hearing.
Okay, do we have a motion to open our public hearing?
I'll make a motion, we open up public hearing.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Public hearing to receive and consider comments regarding proposed amendments to Title 10 of Riverdale City Code, specifically Chapters 13D, 16, 21, 25, and 28. Do we have anything, Shaylee?
I have nothing on YouTube, no emails, and no people are here.
Okay. A motion to close? Or do we need to approve it first, Mike?
No, you're right. Go ahead, do offer a motion to close and we'll go forward from there.
I make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay. Do we approve it now, Mike?
Just be sure to do all in favor.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah, now we can go forward with the Part B.
Okay. Action item 1B, consideration of recommendation to City Council for approval of proposed amendments to Title 10 of Riverdale City Code, specifically Chapters 13D, 16, 21, 25, and 28. Mr. Eggett?
Thank you. And looking at that, it should also have Chapter 14. So it should be 13D, 14, 16, 21, 25, and 28. Just realized that. So anyway, that's how it was provided to the public as well on our public notice, so they had access to all the code revisions. So we
And
should.
number 14 was on there?
Chapter 14 was part of that. Yeah, that was up to the public, so we should still be good. With that being said, you do have the summary of reasoning document in your packet. I could go over each and every one of those, but hopefully you've reviewed them and read them independently, and the public hopefully has had a chance to look at the packet information to see what revisions were being made tonight. If you have any specific questions about any of those revisions or the reasoning for those revisions, please let me know, and I could go into more detail. I also tried to cover briefly in a little bit more detail at our last meeting what those revisions were, where we had a little more time and fewer items. And that being said, I've also provided, following that, some language from the state legislature that was recently approved last year in May and constituted as part of state code. That is in the packet for your review as part of that updated bond warranty requirement. Following that, you'll see then the actual code language changes that are proposed. If you see any concerns with any of the proposed revisions in each respective title, it's clearly underlined in like a blue, or underlined and then a blue coloration. That's the suggested changes, and those changes were provided to the public very clearly going into this public hearing. So they had full access to these comments, and as you can see, Chapter 14 is clearly shown there. So all those are proposed therein. scrolling through the language, then the next set of documents is the clean copy of those showing what the language would look like as if it was permanently adhered to or part of the existing code going forward. And this is how obviously the final product would look that would be approved potentially by the city council and then be instituted in city code. So again, if you have any questions about formatting or grammar or otherwise, please let me know. And then finally, you have the comment again from our city attorney / acting city administrator saying these changes look fine to me, Steve Brooks. And again, I will note for just the purposes of the record that under Title 10, Chapter 28 in Section 5G, there is an addition of language that now says no vehicle shall be allowed to park overnight on anything other than hard surfaces. The new language is hereafter follows, says that are as large or larger than the full size length and width of the vehicle. So that is a new addition from our last meeting 2 weeks ago that our city administrator / city attorney thought would be very helpful in addressing these code enforcement challenges we have with this issue. So with that, I believe that's all the commentary I have, and I'm available to answer any questions or concerns you as a planning commission may have prior to taking any action on this. Thank you very much.
Anybody have any questions? Concerns? Okay, do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the consideration of a recommendation to the City Council for approval of proposed amendments to Title 10, Riverdale City Code, specifically Chapters 13D, 14, 16, 21, 25, and 28.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Perfect. We will move on to action item number E2. Let's see, no, we won't. We're gonna go to E3. Consideration of recommendation to City Council for approval of amended small subdivision plat known as RMRE 1050 West Retail Lot 1, amended subdivision property located approximately 4978 South, 1050 West, Riverdale, Utah, 84405, requested by Anderson, Wallen and Associates, Inc. Mr. Agate?
Thank you. Yeah, the representation tonight is Jake Tate. He's with us. If you have any questions specifically for him relative to the comments, he'll be able to hopefully address or assist. Again, the applicant on this one is Anderson, Wallen and Associates and CCA, also known as Cornwallis Group. They've applied for an amended small subdivision plat of an existing subdivided property site where the Joann's is currently located, as well as undeveloped properties around Joann's between the Joann's location and Sam's Club. The zoning for that location is Retail Commercial Park Overlay Zone, or RCP, which means that there is a master development agreement that, again, the applicant is aware of, but a master development agreement that really doesn't have any say on the subdivision, but could have a little bit of influence on a site plan development in the future. So at this point, don't worry about that too much, other than to know that that's what that RCP means. The proposed amended small subdivision plan, in this case, is a final review and recommendation for approval to the City Council of the proposed plat amendment. There's no public hearing requirement for it. As such, you can make a recommendation for approval, a recommendation for a modified approval. You could table if you felt like it was required with the right reasoning for doing so, or you could recommend not approving it if there was a strong reason for such, again, with a good finding of fact for that. Should it receive a recommendation to the City Council, clearly it would advance to City Council for that final approval process. The ownership found in the county records is FC Riverdale Shopping Center LLC, and I've already noted what its existing use is. The plans would be to subdivide it into 2 lots lying the undeveloped parcels to have hopefully more opportunities for new development on those currently undeveloped parcels where needed to advance and bring new commercial opportunities into this area. Previously, this property was owned by the Boyer Group, but again, CCA is the representative that is noted as FC Riverdale Shopping Center LLC in this case. The general plan use for the property is set as planned commercial high, and this clearly very easily complies with that land use designation, especially if it leads to new commercial development opportunities on these properties. Going into my staff concerns, I really don't have much to note other than on the licensed land surveyor page, the signature hasn't been provided, but that's anticipated to go in once the final plat drawing is ready for recording. If there's a need to add utility company blocks, maybe add that. Exterior lighting devices, street lights aren't shown, but again, that's maybe not even a platting issue, that's more of a site plan thing, so it's not a big deal. And then finally, that if it's applicable, it's really at the discretion of the Public Works Director. This may not be the best place for it, but obviously any development of the property will need to have a water rights transference as part of a future development of it. So that's really all I had. The Public Works Director says the only concern I have on this one is that they have an agreement in place for shared utilities. He probably means between the lots, lot 1 and lot 2. If there's any future, if there's any current lines that exist that go through both properties, then there'll need to be a shared utility agreement for any development of that property, so that, you know, maintenance and care and that sort of thing, upgrades, etc., are all taken care of by both property owners, were this ever to be sold independently for lot 1 or lot 2. The police chief says he doesn't have any concerns at this point. The fire chief didn't provide any comments, and the fire marshal just notes, I do not see any issues with this, and then gives a caveat that his review is advisory, and it doesn't prevent him from any other requirements he might have overlooked at this point in the process, which at the subdivision, there's not a whole lot. Moving on to the city engineer's review comments. He's requesting under plat a few things, notes of just things he'd like to see on the plat as it relates to engineer language that he's seeking to certify the plat and meet specifications of the city. He's wanting a few notes about on-site utilities and facilities on private property regarding culinary water facilities, sanitary sewer facilities, stormwater facilities, and roadway and sidewalk facilities, which is real similar to some of the comments Mr. Douglas has said, but also making sure that any damage that's done on the property in the future of any kind of a project is to be repaired back to city standards. And if the applicant has any questions, I'm sure he could contact Mr. Nelson to discuss those further. He says, in order to fully understand the location of the point of beginning, and note on the drawing calling showing where the River Park Drive, Sam's Club Subdivision Lot 1 is located, needs to be placed on the drawing near the point of beginning. And then his last comment, add to the 1050 West Street wording note in parentheses, Utah Department of Transportation SR 60, just to make sure it's clear that that's a state road, not a city road. And he says he'd be happy to meet the developer or engineer to review above items should they have any questions. Following that, you'll see the application for tonight's request, the payment being made for that, and then the plat itself. So with that, I defer to the Planning Commission for any questions you may have of me or Mr. Tate as the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eggett. Any comments, concerns?
How important are these changes that the city engineer made? Are they important that we should include those before we approve?
I think you could just do a recommendation for approval if you felt comfortable, subject to resolving the outstanding concerns or making sure that the notes from city staff and engineering have been met satisfactorily prior to going to city council, something like that. You can make a motion like that. Okay. That way you allow it to move forward, but then they still will need to resolve things before they could go to city council.
Okay.
Anybody have anything else? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we forward to the city council with a favorable recommendation on the subdivision plat known as the RMRE at 1050 West Riverdale Retail Lot amended subdivision at approximately 4978 South, 1050 West, with the recommendation that they address the concerns of city staff and engineering prior to city council.
Do in a second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Should we do a poll, Mike?
I'm a fan of them when we have actually something that's a real action item, so that's what my recommended preference would be, but you can do what you want as a commission.
Shaylee, will you poll the commissioners, please?
Commissioner Spires,
Aye.
Commissioner DeMar,
Aye.
Commissioner Herman,
Aye.
Commissioner Jones,
Did you hear that?
No.
Aye.
there we go, perfect, and Commissioner Anderson.
Aye.
Okay. Great job. Moving forward for approval.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Number 4, consideration of preliminary subdivision site plan and plat approval of Riverdale Landing Phase 2 subdivision property located approximately 400 to 500 West Riverdale Road, Riverdale, Utah 84405, as requested by Anderson Wallen and Associates and the DRH company. I'll defer to you, Mr. Agate.
Perfect. Yeah, as noted in the work session, and as you noted, DRH company is the applicant, represented by Eric Malberg, who is with us this evening. He's the project engineer on it and has gotten pretty close with the project over the time that he's been working on it, and we've been talking about it through the redevelopment agency and the efforts by Mr. D. Hansen. This is a preliminary subdivision site plan review process point. The plan is for there to be 2 new restaurant building paths with drive-through access. There'll be 2.5 new private drive access aisles that will be part of this project. New utilities and supporting facilities for the development project on this real estate. Located approximately between 400 and 500 West along Riverdale Road to the direct north of Krispy Kreme. The zoning for this is community commercial C2, and it would need to go through conditional use review process at a later date when we actually have a recommendation portion for city council. It's adjacent to cafe, restaurant, vacant building, and apartment complex, and across the street from Commercial Center, its current location, and it is currently owned by DRH Properties LLC. There's no public hearing requirement for this, and in this case, the Planning Commission would be the actual decision-making body. You are making an approval that gives the project vesting rights, limited vesting rights. So it is a little bit different role than what we just did on our last one as a recommendation body. The proposed, let's see. As part of this, I typically like to, when we're going through these kind of reviews, think about the signage and the lighting plans for this. In this case, a good lighting plan has been provided. It's got a photometric sheet with different variations of the lighting. You can kind of see the intensities at different points on the site. And they do have lighting well established in the drawing. There is no current signage plans provided, but it is kind of hard to get a good solid signage plan as a result of not exactly knowing who the tenants are. Signage plans are helpful, though, to help us to know, again, lighting and how the building looks, etc. But they have provided a representation of what the building architecture will be considered to look like in their packet, so you could reference that, kind of get an idea of what the signage on the building might look like and on the site. The plan in talking to the developer, Mr. Hansen, for signage is for there to be a unified commercial center sign. That is something, Eric, that I didn't see in here and you might want to talk to Dee about, is getting the location of that figured out for some kind of a large pole or whatever he wants to do. Whatever you want to do, a 40-foot tall, large multi-tenant sign or whatever he might be thinking, it would be good to have that shown in future iterations of this drawing where that site is located. So we do know that. And any other monumentation if there's lower to the ground monumentation. That being said, the general plan for the area is planned commercial high, and this project easily complies with that request. Moving on to my review, I'll try not to be too dry and make this take too long as you have my report. A lot of these will be in my review a little bit redundant, so I'll only hit on the ones that are new items. But on the cover sheet and also throughout on the subdivision, the address needs to be updated to reflect the new addressing for lots 201 is 4194 South and lot 202 is 4182 South Riverdale Road. Again, to the applicant's credit, they didn't know that I worked on that new addressing, so it's more of just an advisory note there. Under property owner, property developer, the name, address, and phone number needs to be shown somewhere on the packet, and it would be good to have it on the plat as well. Typically, that helps as far as recording. And then approving agency's name and address, we do need to have that shown on the plat, as well as it would be good to have it in the package from Riverdale City somewhere in there. Moving on to page 2, where it says adjacent tract ownership and tax identification numbers. Just the tax ID is not shown on any of the sheets, but the tract ownership names are. So if we could have tax ID, that's just helpful moving forward with us in the county. Again, you see some redundant comments there on page 3 of my report. Under name of approving agents with title stamp signatures, license expiration, signatures not shown on the plat at this time. That's just me saying that there will be signatures where appropriate in the right places when we get to that point. I already talked about outdoor advertising, on location underground tanks and dumpsters. I just noted detailed drawings of stormwater chamber haven't at this time been provided. Moving on to page 4, down under new and existing building. The height of the buildings isn't known at this time for either building, and maybe again that hasn't been solidified, but typically we eventually have an idea of kind of what the height looks like in those buildings. This one I am concerned about on page 5, location, setback, and all dimensions. I didn't have any good setbacks showing what the setbacks for the buildings were. That is something that is very helpful for us just to make sure we're meeting city code and the location of the buildings and how they sit on the site. So that is something that I do need to see in the future for any future, well, for all future updates of this project drawings. Under type of construction, I just noted this will have a design review committee process needed for the exterior, but again, Mr. Malberg is well aware of that process, and I'm sure we'll follow through with that. Under landscaping plans, just noting our code does require in 10.14.12 B2 there to be some kind of general berming or screening. So in the landscaping plan, it would be good to show either the nature of that berming and screening, even if it's a few kind of variations in berming, like we've done before, Eric, just showing that, and then obviously screening, making that note on the landscape plan so it's clear that we're meeting that standard. Page 6, just noting right-of-way, specifically with the term right-of-way or ROW. Page 7, the calculations for retention system haven't been provided at this time. Those will need to be sure, but that's something that the city engineer looks at more closely, so I'll defer to his comments there. Under water meters, valves, and fire hydrants, water meters not identified, size of water meters unknown, location of new and existing valves not shown. No new hydrants shown if off or on site. I do know that it's not, I guess, entirely true in that the drive aisle of 400 West is anticipated to have, is it 2 new fire hydrants, Eric? 2, right? Yeah, 2 new fire hydrants. So I guess in that case, my comment there isn't exactly correct because there will be 2 new fire hydrants there. It's more just making sure that the distances are hit, and this is more of a fire department matter, but the distances are able to hit for drawing water to the 2 building pads as part of the subdivision. So if not, we may need to put a fire hydrant a little bit closer, so just make sure that we're hitting the right distances we need to there. Under telephone, just new telephone utility lines, junction boxes, pole associated manholes not shown if applicable. I'm just noting that now. That will probably be more underlined in the future, but that is something to know. Cable T lines the same way. Under gutter inlet box with bicycle safe grate, the grate isn't identified as bicycle safe grate on the gutter inlet boxes. Thrust blocking, the locations of detail not shown where applicable. Again, drainage and runoff talked about. Water right transfer documentation, applicant needs to work with Public Works Department to provide adequate water rights for the site for 8-6-3 of city code. So I'm sure they're aware of that. That's something that will need to happen prior to getting the final approval. And then the conditional use permit note, which I've already talked about. So That's my review. Moving on to the staff reports, Mr. Douglas has quite a few comments. The applicant is fully aware or has been provided the packet, so should be able to follow these. I'm not going to read each and every one. I'll just note under stormwater, there's 9 items there. You can kind of glance at that. If you see anything specifically you want to hit, please feel free to bring that up as you review and we want to discuss that. Under water, there's been 7 comments noted by our City Public Works Director there relative to the water. Under sewer, there's 2 comments, and under other, there's an additional 4 comments. As it relates to the RDA shared driveway plan documents that have been provided in your packet, Mr. Douglas has noted again additional 14 comments under stormwater, an additional 5 comments under streets, and an additional 4 comments under water, additional 3 comments under sewer, and then finally an additional 6 questions or comments he has under other. So again, that's for the 400 West Road, as well as the road that goes kind of along the back of the buildings, and then the realignment, which I didn't note before, but 500 West, where it currently comes up and it's kinked into what used to be old homes, the plan is to realign that road and to move it more straight for future development, allow for future development as it connects to 550 West. There is potentially a pause with that, and I don't know, Eric, if Dee's talked to you about this, but Sean has talked about maybe looking at if we need to do that at this point or not, or maybe we need to pull back just a little bit and figure out future plans. Okay, so that area may get redacted or revised on future submissions as we figure out what's in the best interest of the RDA expenditures for that realignment. Looks like Eric is aware of that and their team. So just note that in your drawings that may be kind of reevaluated as part of this. But 400 West Brands Way is still good to go as provided. Otherwise, our police chief says no problem. I don't have any concerns with the proposed plans. Our fire chief did not respond, but he usually backs our fire marshal, which says he doesn't see any issues at this time with the caveat note. And then moving on to our city engineer review. Again, he did this in 2 portions. He did a plat review and then he started down a site plan review, but felt like, as I noted before, that the plat review comments were so substantial that he didn't feel comfortable doing a full in-depth site plan review, so he does reserve the right to come back and do a more full site plan review as the plat issues get resolved. Going through the plat comments under plat 1, he says a vacation plat will need to be provided separate from the subdivision dedication plat. Both separate plats can move forward simultaneously as information is provided. This is kind of interesting because it comes back to what I was just talking about with 500 West. The reason he's saying that, the current alignment of 500 West Street would have to be vacated, and the utilities, if any, have to be vacated, realigned, and then rededicated. It's kind of a weird situation. In a way, we're creating a new road and dedicating it, but really we're just trying to realign it. But for everything to be clean, you have to go through that process. So what he's saying is we would have a separate plat that would show the vacation, and then we'd have the other plat that shows the subdivision dedication of that road as part of that plat. So that's what he's talking about there, to make it more clean instead of having it look like a combo, which I don't know legally it matters, but it does make it more clean to see what's going on. And so that's why he's recommending that, to make it easier to understand the process. Under 2, he writes, the public roads which have been shown, 500 West Street, 550 West Street, should be a minimum B plot at 60-foot right-of-way roadways, meet city standards, and then meet city standards cross-section, including sidewalk and park strips, etc. Under 3, where it's Brands Way, the 400 Street, he says, show the Brands access road on the plat is private. So he just wants a very clear note saying that. Under 4, there are several easements shown on the submitted combined plat, which needs to be identified as to location bearing a distance ties are needed. The exact usage needs to be indicated. The note written in reference easement vacation note will need all easements to be shown on the plat. Under 5, identify the existing right-of-way which is to be relocated. Ties bearing distances, who is presently entitled to the right-of-way, where it is now going to be moved to. 6, the corner turn radius on 500 West Street will need to be increased for larger delivery trucks. 7, the new road dedication on easterly extension of 500 West Street needs to be properly dedicated. Again, it's that lingering kind of concern. 8, show the right-of-way width for all surrounding roadways. 9, following requirements applicable must be noted on dedication plat. And again, this is all, it's the note about damaged facilities, in the on-site areas of private property for culinary water, sanitary sewer, stormwater, roadway, and sidewalk that they'll need to be repaired and managed and maintenance to city standards whenever failures occur. 10, plat date needs to be shown and should have the month with the year in the title box. Spelling errors need to be corrected. 11, cross easements need to be provided for entire dedication subdivision. 12, names of the signers of the owner's dedication need to be placed under the signature line, better identify signatures. 13, please show point of beginning. 14, several property lines shown or not shown with proper distance. 15, several additional written notes on the plans. Please review and correct as needed. Not sure what he's getting at there, but I'll trust his judgment. 16, engineer's signature block. He wants specific language showing what he would approve to certify the plat when it is ready to go. Under the improvement drawings, again, he noted submitted improvement drawings relent submitted vacation dedication plat. In order to proceed properly, improvement drawings will need to be updated with all corrections made and then can be reviewed. In other words, comes back to what I said. He got so far, he felt like he didn't want to keep going because of the concerns he kept hitting. So what he's basically saying is there's possibly more reviews of site plan drawings in the future and more comments, but he got to a point where he's concerned and kind of stopped. Other items need to be submitted. He just says a stormwater management plan needs to be submitted for review, and he makes a note about what that should look like. Geotechnical report. This one is weird. I did provide this to him. This is not the applicant's fault necessarily here. I don't know if maybe I didn't print off a hard copy and provide it to him with hard drawings or what, but I did provide him a digital. That being the case, Eric, I can't obviously re-identify that with any future drawing you submit. I will print it off and make sure it goes to him. I'm not sure why he didn't get that. And then he just notes, this is kind of his catch-all, which comes back to what I was saying. The drawings will need to be finished, site flow pattern, correct property lines and site drawing, drive aisles, label all existing lots and streets, better clarify location of each site plan view, include all standard city details, north arrows correctly placed with drawings, scale on all drawings, plan and profile drawings for all utilities, labels and dimensions of all drawings, typical cross-section, roadway, stormwater features, sidewalk and miscellaneous handicap required site features. All details can be downloaded and then gives the website where they can be downloaded. Again, after our city attorney / acting city administrator reviewed Mr. Nelson's comments in the email, there's kind of an email tagged with it. He felt very uncomfortable with us moving forward with approving the preliminary drawing, and his recommendation to me was to identify as such to the Planning Commission his significant concern associated with both Mr. Nelson's and Mr. Douglas's lengthy comments. And he feels like at this point, the best position from his position would be to direct Planning Commission to highly consider tabling it as a result of needing to resolve so many issues. But clearly, you're the Planning Commission. You have discretion to make your own decisions and your actions, so I'll leave that up to you. That being said, finally, you can see the application that was submitted, the fees that have been paid, both for the subdivision and the site plan portion of this, where we're trying to run them together. Sometimes, you'll have subdivision run independent, then they'll come back to your site plan. For the sake of timing, we did talk about this internally. When Mr. Worthen was with us, even we talked about the direction we could take this, and we felt like the project could be done in a way they both could come together and bring forward. But it does make the project that much bigger, both for the applicant's team to put together as well as the reviewing team to take care of, because you're doing two processes together. So I think that's kind of what you're seeing is a lot of big issues that would be a little easier to manage in two independent processes, but they're coming together at the same time. So please take that into note as you consider what the applicant has provided. It is a really big project. It's a lot of work for Mr. Malberg and his team trying to navigate and figure out what we are expecting. And we are doing two processes together at one time for this project. I know the plan is that they would like to get going with construction on this project as early as next spring, early spring, as soon as the snow thaws. So that is, if you're curious in the back of your mind what the time frame is we're trying to achieve here, that's the time frame. But clearly, there's a lot that needs to be done to hit that time frame and get everything recorded between now and then. Following that, you'll see the subdivision plat. First is what I submitted in your packet, and then you'll see the actual site plans for the site. And I think it's the last 5 pages of the project or so is where you'll see then that 400 West Street, Brands Way, private drive area and also the realignment of 500 that are all part of the RDA efforts in this site. So with that, I know it's a lot of information, but I will defer to you as planning commissioners for any questions, comments, ideas you have for the applicant or for me, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Any comments? Questions?
I have a comment. Normally this is kind of a routine issue to approve, but with the number of issues that still need to be addressed is unusually large compared to what we normally see. Personally, I would rather have this tabled until more of these issues are addressed, and then it comes back to us, because this is a large number of issues. I mean, that normally we don't see this number of items, I mean, sometimes you can put stipulations in there that these items are addressed, but there's so many that I would feel more comfortable waiting after it's been tabled and more of these items have been addressed.
I agree with you, Blair.
I have a question for Mr. Malmberg. I was just wondering if you were aware of all these items that the city staff and engineer have included in the packet, and where you feel like you are as far as understanding and getting those things taken care of.
We were made aware of the city engineer's comments, and we were also made aware of all of the comments coming from the Director of Public Works, Sean Douglas, as well. Those were brought to our attention in a phone call on Thursday of last week, and then we had the comments emailed over to us on Friday of last week. So, and we've reached out since then to the city engineer, had conversations with him, and we're planning on addressing a lot of these comments and just working through them. There is some, I guess, we've submitted these plans as preliminary plans. I don't know if the city engineer was maybe reviewing them as preliminary plans, or if he had it in his mind that they were a little bit farther along than that. Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but we are communicating with the city engineer and the public works director and to address a lot of these comments. So, did I answer your question, Rick?
You did, Eric, and thank you. Just looking at what you have proposed, were all those issues taken care of? It would, I think, be a nice addition to our city. But of course, all the I's have to be dotted and the T's crossed before that can happen.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Claire, would you like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. Table this item until more of the issues that city staff, engineers, and others involved are addressed prior to coming to us.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Sheila, will you poll? Please.
Sorry, trying to pull it up. Let's see. Commissioner Jones? Commissioner Spires?
Aye.
Commissioner DeMar?
Aye.
Commissioner Herman,
Aye.
and Commissioner Anderson.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. We'll revisit this hopefully next time. Do we have any discretionary items? Anybody have anything?
I do have one. I'd like to pass on the appreciation to the city staff and everybody else involved in coming around and gathering up all the branches, and, you know, especially after the storm that we had, I'm sure they had a large number more than normal, so I'd just like to pass my appreciation on.
Thank you, Blair. And one thing that you guys should note, a group that you really need to, if you, I don't know, work around anybody who works for this group or you talk to this group, Stoffers Towing did a ton of free work. They donated a lot of time and manpower in helping us rip those out. I think we had, Shelley, I can't remember the number, like 68 trees throughout the community or something they ripped out. Isn't that right?
Yeah, so I did the minutes today on that. So 67 stumps, and it was almost $100,000, and we got charged $1,200 so far, and that's it.
Oh,
They are awesome.
So that's pretty amazing to have a company willing to do that. And they did the same thing for the Washington Terrace City as well. So just, if you ever have towing needs, just think about that. I'm not trying to hold anybody accountable for using them, but it was a very nice gesture of them, and I just want to make sure you know how great a thing they did for us.
they're a great company. And also, the fall cleanup was great.
Yeah, timing was perfect, right?
Any other items? Motion to adjourn?
Motion, we adjourn?
I'll second.
Okay.
This one you have to all in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.